Okay, so we're going to start off with just doing a verbal consent form, just making sure that you understand that this has no risks, no benefits really, other than further research, and that you consent to giving this interview.
I do.
Okay, awesome. So we'll have you start off by saying your name and how to spell that for the record.
Michael Gosman, MichaelGoss as in Sam, MAN.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just going to check this all the time, kind of look down there to make sure we're at the right volume.
Great.
And I don't need this anymore because we're perfect, and it's distracting to me. So why don't you start off by giving us like a bio about yourself, like, where were you born and how did you, where are you from, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I was born in Whitefish Bay and graduated from Whitefish Bay High School. Went to college at Indiana University and had a good experience there in the classroom, but an amazing experience in terms of some of the leadership opportunities and things that I got involved in on campus. I moved to New York after I graduated in August of 2001 without a job, rented an apartment like 2 weeks before September 11th. And that made the job hunt sort of hard. So I struggled a little bit to find work, but I eventually got a job with the History Channel and A&E Television. And I was there for 2 years, first in their ad sales department and then in their legal department. Took a summer off and traveled Southeast Asia for 3 months, which was a great experience. And actually now working with Hmong colleagues and Hmong families, it's really pretty cool because I at least have been to some of the places that that they've been and seen some things and eaten some of their food and just had a really great experience. And then I went to the University of Chicago for law school. I graduated from the law school in 2009 and came to Milwaukee and worked for 3 years at a large law firm in town called White Hirschbeck, soon to be Hush Blackwell. And during that time, liked the people, but really didn't find the work very satisfying or engaging. Thought that I could leave and someone else could be substituted in without much impact on the client, much impact on the firm. And so I just didn't feel all that valuable. So during that time, I became a volunteer with ACTS. I happened to meet Carl Quindell, who was our most recent past executive director, at an event and just couldn't believe all the work that the team was doing with the limited resources they had, the limited name recognition they had, and I wanted to help. So I started as a volunteer. I was, I guess, a founding member of what was the first development or fundraising committee of the organization, and very quickly realized that I enjoyed the work with ACTS much more than my legal career, and so I convinced the board and Carl to bring me on as the assistant director, which would have been in January of 2013. So I was in that role. I was responsible for our fundraising efforts, some of our strategic initiatives, and the formation of our new nonprofit affiliate, ACTS Lending. Became the executive director of it. And then when Carl started his new business about a year ago and left ACTS, I became the executive director. And that sort of brings us to today.
Okay, thank you. So how did you first hear about ACTS? You said you started as a volunteer. So was it just something you were aware of through your work with, your law firm, or?
Yeah, I'd never heard of ACTS. And that's still true for most people in the city. But I happened to meet Carl, who was the executive director, and the passion that he had for the work was really impressive, but even more impressive was his pedigree and his background. So, he was a Brown educated undergrad. He was the valedictorian, I think, at Riverside High School. He was a two-sport college athlete, but he had this love and this passion for the inner city. And he had this team of people who were just so talented, who, were from the neighborhoods and could be doing any number of things outside of the neighborhoods, but really just wanted to help their neighbors become owners. And so I just found it very appealing and wanted to see if there was some way I could help.
That's a lovely overview. Thank you.
Thanks.
So when you were a volunteer, I guess, with ACTS, and you were first starting out, what kind of stuff did you do on a daily basis?
Well, so ACTS was very fortunate in that it had a number of longtime supporters, foundations, banks that had been with us for a long time, that basically said, we love what you do, we don't care that no one knows who you are, and we'll continue to support you. And that enabled Axe to sustain itself in addition to our earned income for our first probably 17 or 18 years. But when I started to get involved at Axe, which was in the immediate aftermath of the foreclosure crisis, it was clear there was just so much more work that we could do, at least to me, and that the team that Axe had assembled was uniquely qualified to help families purchase, fix up, and start to repair our neighborhoods and strengthen their own homes and their own families. And so to do more, you need more earned income, and we've got a good model for earned income, but you also need more support. And so people can't support you if they don't know about you. So a lot of my work was trying to help us figure out, how do we share the story a little bit more? How do we get some more publicity for our work? How do we get ourselves out there so that individuals who would love our work if they only knew about it have heard about us? And so that's when we started doing some more stuff in the media. We had a couple pieces that we submitted that were published in the Journal Sentinel. We started doing some speaking engagements and meeting with folks. And it doesn't happen immediately, but pretty quickly we started to see a significant increase in support. Because once people know about this work, it resonates with a lot of them, and they really want to see how they can help. And so pretty quickly in the first 6-8 months of volunteering, we were starting to see the significant fruits of that labor, even in a fairly limited investment of time on my part. And so that got me really energized to think, well, what if I could actually devote my energies full time to supporting the organization?
So I guess I'd like to move into this community specifically is kind of the main one with you guys here. And were you familiar with the area before you started working with Axe, and then also have you seen it change significantly since you've been here?
So I'm a bit of an anomaly on the Axe team because I wasn't familiar with the area, and not just this area. I wasn't really familiar with the inner city at all. I grew up in the suburbs. I went to a fancy school. So my exposure to the inner city was mostly when I would drive through to get somewhere, which is pretty typical of our donors as well, that they've never gotten out of their cars in our neighborhoods. And so that was really eye-opening for me, because I think I had some preconceived notions about how different families might be in inner city neighborhoods, or what the quality of life is or should or would be like. And it was only through getting to know members of the Axe team and then getting to meet our families as we tried to tell their stories that I gained an appreciation for the incredible amount of strength that exists in this neighborhood. So many strong families, so many people that are incredibly resilient, that are able to, even in the face of much greater adversity than most of us have faced, or at least I've faced, persevere and improve their own lives and make a good place to live for their families. And so that's really what hooked me. I loved the idea that I could help the organization and thinking about how I could do that. But it was seeing that it wasn't a Band-Aid. It was really just providing access to ownership for really strong individuals who just need a trusted guide. They need someone who can help walk them through the process. And that's what our team members do.
Can you give me some examples of some of the families that you've met that have changed your opinion on what a family looks like in this kind of in the inner city, I guess?
Well, the first thing is I knew there were a lot of Hmong residents of Milwaukee, but I didn't have relationships with Hmong families. And through my job here, I've gotten to know some Hmong families, like Linda Tao and her husband Nu Yang. I've gotten to know Peng, who's the secretary at St. Michael's, and is Laotian. She lives on 25th Street. There's a whole block right there of Axe homeowners or one-time Axe homeowners. And so I've gotten to, visit their homes and meet their families. And I've just been sort of in awe of the level of hospitality and that they display. I think to my own friend network, and we like to think that when someone comes over, we're like treating a guest nicely, and it pales in comparison. Or even Belia Cha, my colleague, who's having some of us over for lunch on Friday, and she makes the most amazing meal and makes you feel like so warm and so welcome. And I think that that's just really special. And I think it's easy, if you don't spend time in these neighborhoods or you don't get to know these families, to assume that, they wouldn't even have the resources to be welcoming. But actually being welcoming is not about resources. It's about like the attitude and the way that they want to treat you and your as a guest. And so, Linda Tao typifies that. Pastor Lee, whose home I think maybe members of your team may have. Every time you're in their home, they're trying to feed you. They're so appreciative, and it's really just amazing what they're doing. And every time you're there, you learn something new that they're doing to help their community. The last time we were at Pastor Lee's, I think his wife mentioned offhandedly that there was a formerly homeless man that was living with them. And it's nothing that they like talk about. If you didn't ask them, you probably wouldn't hear. I don't know why it even came up, but they're just really solid people, solid families. They care about this community. And that's true in this neighborhood, and that's true with the Hmong and Laotian families, but it's absolutely true on the south side with our Latino families, or on the north side with African American families. I can remember an event we did on the north side with, it was a single mom, and I think she had 2 or 3 children, and really tough rehab, and we brought in some volunteers to do some painting, and she needed to work that day, so she wasn't going to be there for most of the time. And then when she showed up, she purchased like 3 or 4 pizzas for the volunteer group, and like gotten soda for us, and it was like so unnecessary, because like we were getting this benefit from participating and feeling like we were helping. But there's just that generosity of spirit where I don't know, sometimes it makes me feel really cheap because I see the lengths that a lot of the families we interact with will go to show their appreciation, and it's really touching.
Thank you. That's amazing. I don't even know where to go from here. I'm just trying to like wrap my head around everything. So, I guess moving on. So, ACTS is very special. It's a very different housing nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how it differs from other neighborhood organizations and community organizations in this area, and also more about exactly what ACTS does, because we want to get like that process on tape so we can really demonstrate this is exactly what you guys do.
So let me start with that second part, and then maybe I'll get to the first, if that's okay. So ACTS provides 4 services that many families need to become sustainable, successful homeowners. We're a home buying counseling agency, so we work one-on-one with families to prepare them for home ownership. We pull their credit reports. We try and get them to a place where either they can qualify for a bank loan if they're going to get a bank mortgage, or they can qualify for our program to purchase a home for cash. That can be a process of weeks or months or years, depending on where the family's at and how quickly the family's able to address some of their credit challenges. Our real estate staff is really, I think, what ACTS is most known for. We have 4 full-time realtors on our team, and a realtor assistant now, who are in the marketplace representing families in the purchase of a home. It's a different model than most nonprofits. There's only, I think, a few nonprofit real estate brokerages in the country. And it's really needed in a market where a lot of the homes are selling for $3,500, because the amount of work it takes to prepare a family to become an owner of that home dwarfs the amount you can earn in commission. And so having a model that allows you to not try and upsell the family, but work with what the family's got, get the family to the finish line, be with them as a trusted guide. I think there's a lot of value that we add. Our rehab team supports families who are purchasing the vacant, vandalized homes. So last year, approximately 70 of our 120 sales were foreclosures. Most of them needed significant work. And so the rehab team starts with the family, puts together a scope of work before the home's purchased so that they understand the work that's involved in getting the home decent and safe so they can occupy it. And then after closing is when their work really starts in earnest, where they're working with the family, helping that family understand the things they should do, the things that they should have professionals do, helping solicit bids from contractors to the extent the family wants the support, reviewing the bids, helping the family understand the benefits and the costs of working with different contractors. And then once the work's been done, being by the family side to indicate whether we think the work's been done to the appropriate standard or not. If the work's not been done properly, coach the family, talk to the family about how we can work with the contractor to hopefully get it right. And our newest program, which is actually through our affiliate, Axe Lending, is that we lend money to a lot of the families that are purchasing the foreclosed homes. So we'll lend now up to $15,000 to support a family's rehab of the home. It's a 60-month repayment period. It's a 6% interest loan. So a family that borrows the maximum loan is paying $289 a month for their mortgage. With taxes and insurance, that brings a monthly housing cost to roughly $400 for most of our families, which when you figure that they're spending $650, $750, $850 to rent, it's just a huge cost savings. And so when you talk about what makes Axe different from other groups or other programs, there's a few things. We're a one-stop shop. So we don't just do the counseling, we don't just do the real estate, we don't just do the rehab, we don't just do the lending. We're the only game in town that does all those things and puts them together so that a family, should it choose, can stay with us from the beginning to the end. And we're also in the marketplace. And I think that distinguishes us from most other nonprofits. We're really more of a social enterprise in that we're providing market-based services. And some of our services are at a loss. Others might be break even. Others are modestly profitable. But we're really trying to, in essence, take a marketplace that's really struggling, get it to function again, with the goal being that eventually a nonprofit real estate brokerage isn't needed. You'll have for-profit realtors that'll want to do this work and will be excited to work in our neighborhoods and help these families purchase homes. And so our model is really predicated on that. It's being businesslike. It's trying to leverage the marketplace, leverage bank financing, leverage the skills and the talents of the volunteers that we have, and get the market in Axe neighborhoods really working. And on blocks where we have a lot of success, we cease to be needed. And so we'll start to see, there's transactions that are happening. There's new owners coming in. They didn't need to use us for the real estate piece. They had it on their own. They had someone else that was willing to represent them. There was a family that wanted to sell. That's a success story. So our success isn't just based on how many homes have we done. It's based on how is the neighborhood doing. And we've had ups and downs. I think that we've had a significant impact in the Washington Park neighborhood. In the area of Washington Park and right around our office right here, we've probably helped 600 or 700 families, I'm guessing, purchase homes. Might be more than that over the last 20 years. 2,000 families overall throughout our program. But we're not the only force that's existing in these neighborhoods. So when our program was started, it was an incredibly rough period in Washington Park and the St. Michael's neighborhood. Crime was very high, lots of drug use, lots of violence. In comparison now, things are actually relatively good, but it ebbs and it flows. The foreclosure crisis certainly hit our neighborhood hard. Homes that maybe once would have sold for $120,000 now might sell for $70,000. So that has an impact, not just on the families that are renting and the families that are owning, but on everyone that lives in the neighborhood. And so we believe we've been a positive force for the neighborhood, but I can't claim that there are so many other factors that are also helping the neighborhood. Habitat has had a major role in Washington Park. There are others that, are major players. Washington Park Partners has been a strong advocate for the neighborhood and done a lot of really good things. So there's a ton of other social service organizations that are doing interesting things. And then there's also a lot of things that are somewhat out of all of our control related to, crime and drug use and other things. And so, but I just can't believe that the 600 or 700 families that are homeowners in this neighborhood, because of our efforts, aren't making this a better community to live in for the families, for themselves, and for for their neighbors.
So you touched on the foreclosure crisis actually twice now, and you said that that was difficult for you guys as an organization. And I guess what I would like is some examples or stories that you could really share and go into more detail about that. That's something that's very interesting to us.
Well, so we've adapted as an organization to reflect the market. And so if you go back to 2006, we might not have sold one foreclosure. There just weren't a lot of foreclosures in our neighborhoods. And so we were providing the counseling and the real estate brokerage, but all of our families were getting bank financing. Most of them were able to get bank financing. They were having, usually traditional mortgage product. And the home values were quite high. So the cost savings they were generating by owning versus renting was not necessarily significant. They were drawn to own a home. There are other benefits besides cost savings, but housing costs in our neighborhood in Washington Park were not super depressed. They were more modestly priced. That really changed after 2008. And so our program really needed to adapt, because just having a great realtor or a great counselor doesn't help if all of the homes are deeply distressed and the families need access to rehab capital. So the two things we've done in response to that are very significant is we've really grown out our rehab support team. So whereas we, in 2008, may have had, I don't even think we had a part-time rehab person. I think it was just an offset of what Carl, who was the executive director, was doing in 2008. Then we added one, then we added 1.5. Now we're 4. And so we have a team that's really built around trying to support families who are purchasing these really challenged properties. And we also learned a tough lesson, which is that although we value our bank partners and we're very much need their support, we don't ever want to be wholly dependent on the banks for financing, because when you have a distressed market, the banks are going to step back either because of their own risk tolerance or because of regulations or because of other factors. And so that's what the genesis of the Axe Lending Loan Fund. We don't want to replace banks. Anytime a bank will do a deal, that we want them to do it, not us. But if the banks can't and the banks won't, and we know we have families that are primed for success, we need to be able to give them that pathway. And so that's another major response is the advent of that loan program and being able to provide the financing to families that really need it. The other thing is it's caused us to take a significant look at our foreclosures over time, because our program is set up, it's not set up to guarantee success. What I mean by that is we're an empowerment program. So we give the families are in control. We're the guide. And so part of that model is that the families that succeed are going to succeed in ways that they can take complete credit for, they can be very proud of, and they can often succeed in spectacular ways. They can save hundreds of dollars a month. They can build beautiful homes at costs that would be unimaginable to most people. The downside of that is if the family's in control, the family owns the home from day one, the family can also make mistakes, the family can have setbacks, there can be a death, there can be an illness, there can be a job loss. And so we've really taken a hard look at how are our families doing. And so the result of that hard look that really became important after the foreclosure crisis, where lots of families and investors lost their homes, was to see, well, how are our families doing? And the result of that was that we've seen that 77% of the families that purchased homes through our program still own that same home. 17% sold the home in a voluntary transaction, so often moving out of town or moving up, and 6% experienced a foreclosure. And that 6% number on the one hand is concerning. We want that number to be as close to zero as possible. On the other hand, mortgage industry experts have told us in our neighborhoods during the time periods we've operated, they would have expected a foreclosure rate that was maybe double that. So it's sort of been a bit of encouragement. Hey, you're doing some things right, but also you need to really watch this and make sure that you're setting families up to be successful.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm cognitively mapping right now. So can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, your expansion after, I forget who mentioned it, but somebody mentioned like the last 5 years have been a huge couple of years for you guys in terms of expansion. And can you talk like about that and kind of your role involved with that?
Well, so I think from inception in 1995 until the foreclosure crisis in '08, Axe was very much sort of a small is beautiful model. We believed in the work we were doing. We had a good, very small group of people doing it. They could work very independently. And I think everyone was proud of the effort and proud of all the families we were supporting. I think for many of us, something changed in the aftermath of the foreclosure crisis when all of a sudden there were thousands of vacant homes in our city, and also thousands of families who couldn't qualify for a bank mortgage but wanted to become owners and were willing to put in a lot of hard work. And so we sort of challenged ourselves. If we as a group can't rise to the occasion and do a lot more, especially with the vacant vandalized homes, who else is going to do this? Someone who's never done this before? We've sort of been training to do this for the first 15, 16 years of our existence. And so that's caused us to do some things. It's caused us to grow out our rehab team. It's caused us internally to focus a lot of our efforts on how do we get, our deals are so complex. Now we need a counselor, we need a realtor, we need a rehab person, we need a lender. How do we get all these different people, often from different countries of origin, different educational backgrounds, how do we get them all pulling in the same direction, understanding each other's roles, with the idea being that as beautiful as it is that last year we helped 120 families, we don't feel like we're that far away from helping 250 families or from documenting this model in such a way that other cities wouldn't want to adopt it, whether we would play some sort of consulting role, whether we would have people under our umbrella that would do this work. Our model is one that we haven't seen anyone else in the country that's doing it. And in a lot of Rust Belt cities, a lot of depressed industrial metropolitan areas, we think that there's a lot of potential for this model to work. Now, it only works if it's led by and operated by people who are from that community. So a major lesson that I learned in my time at Axe and through seeing the leadership of John Worm and Carl Quindell was just how critical it is not to think that you're some savior who's going to parachute in, but actually to have a team that is from these neighborhoods, lives in these neighborhoods, knows these neighborhoods. It changes the whole tenor of the discussion. And I can say that as someone who's not from these neighborhoods, because if I come in and I'm helping a family, it's me sort of saying, oh, I'm smart, I'm coming from outside, I'm going to show you how to do it. Whereas when our team members are doing the coaching, what they're saying is, I've done this. Like, I'm treating you like a sister. I'm treating you like a brother. Like, do you want me to show you how I did it so that you can do it for yourself? That's a very different discussion. I think it's a big reason we've been so successful. And so as we think about doing more, it's always with an eye towards, okay, but we need to retain that connection. We need to retain that neighborhood character. We need to retain the relationships we have with the neighborhoods. And so if we think about expanding, doing more in other places, helping other cities, it always needs to be with like the local grassroots leaders being the ones at the helm. But maybe there's some role we can play in helping to explain the model, helping to provide support for the model, helping them be successful so that maybe they don't have all the growing pains we've had over 20 years.
Yeah, just let Thomas be there for a second. So you mentioned John Worm also, and I know he played a really critical role in like kind of connecting Axe and the city, government together. And you talk a lot about these foreclosed homes that I believe are usually owned by the city. Could you talk us through some of the more like nitty gritty, like what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like what did I guess John Worm do? Because we didn't get an opportunity to interview him when we walked.
So John Worm was the de facto head of the program from inception to 2008. And so he was working for the city, but he basically led our home ownership efforts as our city liaison. And the work that we're doing today is really a combination of several individuals' visions, certainly Father Dennis and certainly John Worm, as well as Carl, and a host of other longtime board members and others. But if you needed to just say, three people, it's really John Worm, Father Dennis, and Carl that have, sculpted this organization in addition to our staff. So, Belia's been with us since inception. She's had as much influence as anyone and is just incredible. And so our relationship with the city has evolved over time. When the economy was strong, when you could do a lot of new construction, I think the city was mostly indifferent to our efforts because most of our families aren't great in terms of curb appeal at the outside of their home. It's not a big splash. You don't get a front page story about one family at a time buying a home, fixing it up a little bit, living there. So not to say they weren't supportive, but it wasn't a focus at a time when there was a lot of new construction and ability to get financing for development and a lot of subsidy available. In the aftermath of the foreclosure crisis, we became more valuable because although they would still love to do mostly new construction, they'd still love to make homes consistently at a higher quality than our families are able to guarantee. They've seen that they have an inventory of 1,200 homes. And the last thing they want to do is to be a large property owner. And so that's where, over the last few years, a significant partnership's developed where they provide some programmatic support. They helped provide the funding for our rehab team to expand so that they could do more. And we had a goal with our city contract over a 3-year period from 2014 through the end of this year to help 136 families purchase city tax foreclosures. And I haven't checked the numbers super recently, but I think we're probably in the 110 range so far. So within screaming distance of reaching that goal by the end of the year. And that's something that we're proud of. At the same time, the city still owns 1,200 homes. And so we're constantly trying to figure out how can we do more, how can we do better with the vacant vandalized stock. And whereas at the beginning of the foreclosure crisis, most of the homes were bank foreclosures, now the vast majority of the foreclosed homes are city owned. And so continuing to try and tackle that challenge, whether it's through a formal partnership with the city or an informal partnership, is something that I know our team, our board, all of us are really committed to.
So which do you have right now, informal or formal?
Now we have a formal partnership. So we have a 3-year contract from 2013 to the end of this year. Unclear what happens after that. The foreclosure crisis hasn't receded, but there's always different priorities. There's been a lot of focus on crime. Will the funds that were potentially earmarked for home ownership switch to that direction? We have no guarantee of continued funding through the city, but we're hopeful, and we also are going to do the important work that we need to do, whether there's funding or not, and we're going to figure out how we can get the support through earned income or through donations to do the work, because we think it's valuable.
I think it's valuable too, so that's a bonus for you guys. Not my support. I guess I would like to know a little bit more about, you've mentioned that you are not from this community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious to know if working with ACTS and working with these families that you've mentioned, Pastor Lee, etc., how has that changed how you view home and how you understand home ownership at all?
Well, I think I take less for granted. I've definitely led a pretty charmed existence. Got to attend great public schools, had a lot of family support. And so I think it's easy to sort of, if you're surrounded by people that are from those similar circumstances, to not really value the things you have, or to want a bunch of things you don't really need, but that, are shiny, bright, shiny objects. And all of us are guilty of that to some degree. But I definitely think I have not only a newfound appreciation for the things that I have, but really more than that, incredible admiration for the strength of huge numbers of families that live in our inner city. And so whereas before, I think because I was ignorant, would have thought that there was less resilience in an inner city neighborhood than maybe in my cushy suburb, I now see it's actually the opposite. Like most of us, the people I grew up with, we didn't have the same sort of tests. And so it was easy to think that we were, doing really great, but without needing to deal with so many of the challenges that a lot of the families we work with face daily. And when I see what those challenges are, whether it's working multiple jobs or balancing daycare or not having a way to get your kids to school or taking public transportation to work and not knowing whether it's going to take you 20 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes, and then still playing an active life in your family and supporting your neighbors, it definitely makes you realize that, I guess, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Like, I feel like that's sort of the way I think now about most of our neighbors, that I'm just sort of envious of their strength and just grateful that they're so strong.
If you need to take the phone, go ahead. All right. So there's more here. I swear. So I think you go for like another hour. So moving forward, what's your vision for ACTS?
Well, there's a bunch of things that excite me about where we're headed. The two short-term things that I'm really excited about are us investing some time and some money and developing some partnerships so that we really understand what the outcomes of this work is. We have great anecdotes right now. We've got great foreclosure statistics. We don't have some of the direct ties to health improvement, safety improvement, educational improvement that I am confident we would discover with a robust analysis of our work. But that type of study is a huge amount of work and requires a huge amount of support and funding. And so one of the things I'm excited about is figuring out who our partners are to take on a project like that. Related to that, I think the continued growth of our loan fund is an incredibly exciting thing, not only for ACTS, but for our neighborhoods. Our loan fund right now, we've got like 93 loans, 92 are current. So our families are paying us back every month on time. It defies what anyone would have predicted on a portfolio of families, most of whom are unbankable or can't get a mortgage. And being able to access capital is powerful. And I hope someday it's bank capital and that we're transitioning these families into banking relationships. But even if it's not, just giving a family access to the money needed to make an investment like a home purchase, I think it's really important. And I think we can grow those efforts exponentially if we continue to have the success we're having. So our ambition is to this year originate around $400,000 in new loans. 5 years from now, that's supposed to be $1.9 million based on our projections. Now, a lot's going to happen between now and then. Our plans can change, but I think when you start being able to invest that type of capital, especially since it only takes $10,000 or $20,000 per transaction to really help a family get a home decent, you start to go beyond just individual impact and block impact and start to create neighborhood impact. And that's really exciting. And then, though we have a bit of work to do documenting our processes and procedures, I think that this is a model that needs to be shared in some fashion. We get inquiries from other cities in the state. We get inquiries from other random, other cities that hear about this work and want to know how they can do it. And I'd love to figure out what the right way is for us to share some of our learning and potentially help, whether that's us doing the work in another city with local leaders, whether that's us providing some sort of technical assistance to these groups that are starting out that want to do something similar. But I think that there's a lot of potential there. And in large part because what we have here isn't just a nonprofit, it's a pretty viable business model. And so I think we should, over the years, be able to greatly increase the amount of work we do without necessarily increasing in the same way our fundraising capacity because of the earned income potential from our real estate operations, from our rehab work, from our loan originations. And so I'm really excited to see what the future holds for us and more importantly for our families and our neighborhoods, because that's the whole point of this.
I think my last question will probably just be, can you sum up in your own words what you see, like in one sentence, what ACT's mission is?
Well, our mission is vibrant Milwaukee neighborhoods through homeownership. And it took a little while recently for us to get to that. But I think it sums up what we're trying to... Actually, scratch that. Can you scratch that? I just gave you the vision. Hold on.
Vision.
Absolutely. What are you talking about?
So...
Scratch.
AXE's vision is vibrant Milwaukee neighborhoods through homeownership. AXE's mission is empowerment through homeownership. And that's why sometimes homeownership is important. It's our business, but the empowerment piece is actually more important in a lot of ways. It's not providing a family with a home. It's providing the family with the confidence and the support and the guidance that they need to achieve this on their own. Because then it's not just about them having a safe and decent home for their family. It's about the process they've gone through and the strength that they've exhibited and the confidence that they've gained, so that whether the next venture is a new job or an entrepreneurial pursuit or educational, they're able to meet those challenges and feel confident doing it. It's not supposed to just be about the house. That's supposed to be the start.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joe, do you have questions?
I guess the one question that I have is going back to AXE lending.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I'd just love to get like a little bit more like clarification on that, because it sounds like is that kind of a major piece that you were involved in kind of bringing and getting on its feet?
Yeah, so AXE, probably starting right around 2008, made like a couple or a few loans a year.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a program. It was just like, we have this family, we really believe in them, we know they can be successful, the bank can't lend for this reason or that reason, and so we'd make a loan. And so it was 2 or 3 loans a year, and then maybe it was 4 or 5 loans a year. And when I came on at AXE in 2013, maybe it was 10 or 12 loans or something a year. And so we sort of had a decision to make, which is this something that's really important and that we're going to invest in and we're going to treat it like its own business? Or is this just something that we do periodically based on need? And we decided there was a huge need and a huge benefit to our neighborhoods and to our families for us to invest in the lending efforts. So I was responsible for spearheading our incorporation of Axe Lending as a new entity and became its first executive director. So even though I've only been executive director of Axe Housing for a year, I've been executive director of Axe Lending for maybe 2.5 or 3 years. And so I can't claim credit that the vision for Axe Lending was all mine. Like, it had started way before me, but I certainly brought an energy and enthusiasm to it. And that was one of the key reasons I joined Axe. I thought that the lending activity had a whole lot of potential and was something that I really wanted to personally get involved in. And so in my role as assistant director and even as executive director, I'm not hands-on in the program except for that lending piece, which is something that I've remained very involved in. And it's my connection to the families. So most of the families that I get to know, it's through the process of preparing them for the loan, sending a loan to our loan review committee, having them sign the loan documents, helping to explain what this loan means, what the obligations are, what the benefits are. And I do think it's become as critical as any of our other departments in terms of the value it brings to the families that we're serving.
Do you have you found through the time that it's really become, like, since 2013, like you're saying, have you seen, I guess, put it in a way, like, repeat families coming in for loans, or is it's an educational model, like an empowerment model? So once a family is able to establish a line of credit, are they getting out of coming back for a loan, or do they come back until they build up enough credit to move on?
So in the vast majority of cases, it's one loan. They receive one loan. It's repayable over 60 months. They have monthly payments. At first our loan fund was lending $3,000 at a time, so it was a $50 monthly payment. Now our max loan is $15,000, so the payment's gone up with interest to about $289 a month. And so our goal, our desire is that they make their monthly payments for 60 months and then they're debt free. Now, we do have families who don't take out a loan when they buy their home, but then they hit some adversity and they'll reach out to us and we'll lend them money for projects, assuming they meet the criteria. We also have families who might take out a loan, pay a lot of it off, and then have something else come up and need access to additional capital. So it's nice that we have this service and we can support families once they purchased with a loan. But the goal is, when we're doing our job right, they get one loan, they pay the loan off, and then they're debt free. Because a lot of our families now, just a couple months back, we had 4 families the same month that paid off their loan. And they own their homes free and clear. And there aren't many of us, regardless of neighborhood, that are in that position. That's just such a powerful position to be in. It brings down, all you're paying is taxes and insurance. Maybe you're spending $150 a month on your housing cost. And especially if you're renting out a side of a duplex, so maybe you could be making $300-400 a month in addition to having a free place to live. And so that aspect of providing access to capital, but having it be a loan, that's not grant money, that's a loan money. And then making sure that it is paid back on time, and that then when they're done, they actually own their home free and clear. They don't need additional debt. That's what we're hoping for.
That's awesome, yeah. Not to jump topics, but another, I guess, kind of my question would be, I know you hit on it a few times, to promote the model as an ability to get it into other cities that could use this as a similar way of empowerment. Do you ever see a point where, and I don't know if this would be a dark question at all, but to where Axe isn't needed within this community?
Oh, that's great. That would be a dream. So from my perspective, we're in business to put ourselves out of business. We've got a really talented team. If we're not needed, everyone here could find something else to do. And I include myself in that camp. So that would be an incredible success. And our focus areas, they adjust over time. And so the hope is that more and more neighborhoods don't need a nonprofit real estate brokerage, don't need our support. And then we can focus our efforts elsewhere. And if the city of Milwaukee could get to a point where we're not needed, that would be the type of city I want to live in. And a real reason to celebrate.
Kind of a utopian vision. I mean, do you have any questions for us?
No?
Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you want to share as well? I feel like we
I
haven't.
think you guys did a good job.
We try.
I feel like there's so much, I just don't even know
Yeah.
where to go sometimes.
No, I think you guys did a great job.
Okay. If there's anything that comes up as you're thinking about this too, feel free to share with us. Reach out to us and let us know if there's something more that comes to mind.
Great.
So.
Well, I'm really excited to see the results of all this hard work.
Yeah, we are too. It's been a lot.
I'm
of
not
fun.
sure if you know about like the results. I mean, this does go on our website.
Yeah.
And then we make boards.
Mhm.
Obviously, your interview, we won't have like sound coming out of that. And then actually, Murray, the third group member, is making a documentary.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
And I saw the work of last year's group
Mm-hmm.
and was really impressed and excited. So that was part of the reason we decided to, shack up with you here for a couple weeks.
Yeah, we appreciate the hospitality
Yeah.
you guys have put up.
I know we're kind of everywhere underfoot all of the time.
Well, there's a lot of you. We're not used to all the activities, so it takes some getting used to.
I
But
was like typing. I'm like, anyway, I'll go ahead and turn this on. Thank you.
awesome.